Hey, we got breaking news here.
What we got?
Ian Rappaport just tweeted, the Falcons are trading all-pro wide receiver Julio Jones to the Titans in exchange for at least a second-round pick. Adam Schefter says Falcons and Titans still are discussing whether the package for Julio Jones will be a second and a fifth-round pick or a second-round pick with a swap of other picks per source. We got breaking news here on the show, folks.
Let's get it.
Can I say this?
Yes,
can I
please.
say this right now? Can I? Oh, so now I got a busy afternoon, guys. So let me just say this. When I did my trade package segment on Locked On Titans with Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons, we said a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick, and then I threw in Rashaan Evans as a defensive starter. But if the Falcons don't want a player back because salary cap, that makes sense. But, hey, second and fifth-round pick, me and Aaron made the deal a week ago. So let's go, baby. Julio to Tennessee.
There we
Julio!
go.
I'm loving it. This is great. This is absolutely great. Tyler, we know that you now have a very, very busy day ahead of you. Everybody make sure you follow at Tic Tac Titans on Twitter for all of the bonus content, all the immediate reactions, the Locked On Now coming soon, everything that you need, all of it on the way. Tyler, we'll let you get out of here, man. But any other closing thoughts about what this means for the Tennessee Titans before you're out of here?
I think that this is the reality that we believe it is right now. Obviously, minds are swirling, but with the Titans, what they have on offense, how they've reallocated a lot of their resources and their money to the defensive side of the ball, I think the Titans have what they need on offense now to continue with that explosive 30-point-per-game offense, and now have put enough on the defensive side of the ball in the secondary with the draft and free agency with the pass rush. The Titans legitimately, I think, are in the top 5 or 6 teams that can say they are a Super Bowl contender in the NFL. And it's a very exciting day and exciting time. I mean, Clowney didn't work out, but the Titans able to land a big-time player like Clowney and be viewed as a team that's a winning team that people want to go to with a good quarterback like Ryan Tannehill. Just the feel around the Tennessee Titans is as optimistic and as different now as it has been since the early 2000s. And I could not be more excited to get the heck off of here and start breaking it all down, man. This is a great time. What timing? Hey, you're not going to find this anywhere else, baby. Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely, buddy. We will see you here soon. Keep up the great work. And we'll see you in a bit. Man, how exciting is that? So everybody, please make sure you go and check out at the top of the screen right over there, at Locked On Titans, or not at Locked On Titans, but follow Locked On Titans. Make sure you check them out wherever you get your podcasts, and then below at Tic Tac Titans on Twitter to keep up with everything Tyler's got here. We're going to get to our next guest, Gino Camilleri, here in just a moment, because I know he can hear us, so I want him to know. We're coming to you in just a moment. But Cody, let's talk about this trade real quick. So the details of this trade, second and fifth round pick is what we're kind of expecting to get Julio Jones from Atlanta to Tennessee?
So what Ian Rappaport's saying right now, the deal may not be official for a couple of days. Julio still has to go to Tennessee, take the physical, but he is landing in Tennessee. More likely, it's going to be around for that second and fifth. So we'll see how things go. But I mean, this changes the landscape a little bit. We just got done talking with Aaron, and Aaron's like, "Hey, we may not see something to the end of July." Well, he thought he was done, but they brought him back just now. So Locked On Falcons and Locked On Titans, I think, are going to have some really great shows this week to really talk about how this move impacts their respective franchises. Make sure you check out the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite audio podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or the Odyssey app, folks. They have you covered with all the latest news with Julio Jones, and not to mention the Locked On NFL podcast. Bo Brock has Monday's episode, so be sure to check that out as well.
Yeah, these guys are about to be all over the place. If you're in the Atlanta area, turn it to WXIA, because I know you're going to see Aaron Freeman on 11 Alive here over the weekend as well. What a wild day for this to, that this breaks as we're sitting there talking to Tyler. So let's talk a little bit about this trade before we get to Gino and the Eagles. What does this mean for the Tennessee Titans? I mean, we hear from Tyler that this makes them a bit of a Super Bowl contender offense. Do you agree with that? Do you think that there's still more things that they need to work on outside, or is this that big of a move for them?
Well, I think it shifts maybe the favoritism for them to win the division in that AFC South division. I think that it was really right now on paper. I mean, when we talk about it, it looks like either Indy or Tennessee. I think it gives Tennessee now the clear-cut advantage. Those matchups are going to be fun. We're going to see some primetime games between those two teams. But I don't know, Ross. I mean, I think outside of it, we see where Tennessee's at. Obviously, for them having a new offense this year, to me, that's the question. How much of their offense really is going to change from what they've been successful at with Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, a lot of that play action, to now they have A.J. Brown, who's a stud. They have Julio Jones, who's a stud. They have Derrick Henry. The tight end position right now is kind of a question for me for Tennessee because we know Jonnu Smith last year was such a huge threat for them. That's going to be an angle for me. It's going to make them better, but is it going to make them favorites in the AFC? I don't think so. Not yet, at least. I think it's going to make them competitive. Obviously, they're in the playoff picture, but does it put them there with Kansas City? I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, no matter what, that's the prestige you're trying to get to, right? Like if you're going to win the AFC, you have to not only topple your division, but you have to topple the Kansas City Chiefs. And so is this enough to get them there? We'll find out. I think that this is really exciting, not only for, Tyler is pumped and he's ready to go, but you look at what this also means for Ryan Tannehill, what this means for Derrick Henry as well. This has a ripple effect that addresses this entire Tennessee Titans offense, and in a way also helps to address the defense as well, to where if there are defensive efficiencies, now all of a sudden this is a team with legitimate firepower on the offensive side to be able to keep pace in a scoring matter in a way that maybe they weren't able to do with a bit more of a run first or run heavy approach behind Derrick Henry.
Hey, just throw it up to Julio. He's going to go get it.
Yeah, he'll find a way to do it.
I thought for them too this offseason, I was thinking, the loss of Corey Davis was huge, which, I think it was, but now you factor it in, it's like, okay, it's not really much of a loss at all anymore because you have Julio, you have A.J. Brown, A.J. Brown is so damn unreal as a player. I know our guy Croc Talk TV, he's watching. Eric Crocker, one of the new co-hosts over there, the Lockdown 49ers podcast. He covers defensive backs. He's got the defensive back angle, but also from a DB's perspective, going up against a guy like A.J. Brown is going to be a tough business. Going up against a guy like Julio Jones, you never really can take the risk of single covering these guys because they can hurt you. It doesn't matter. As long as a quarterback can place the ball high to the outside on a 9 route, Julio is going to win that matchup 9 times out of 10. So it's going to be really tough to see how it goes, but this definitely impacts the landscape of those teams respectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the other thing, too, that I think really helps for, and maybe is the difference for Julio Jones. Julio Jones was a little bit let me not even say a little bit. Let me stop trying to hedge it. He was underutilized in the red zone.
Yeah.
In Atlanta. You have this guy who is just athletic as all get out, big as all get out. He has all the tools, but was not utilized in the red zone at all. Now, all of a sudden, you have an offense with the Tennessee Titans that has every piece that they need to be able to operate within the 20s in the ground, but then also be able to go to the air, whether it be to Julio Jones or to A.J. Brown, for that matter, between either one of those two guys in the red zone, and finally be able to utilize him in a way that his game continues and moves forward, to where it's not just a yardage conversation for Julio Jones anymore in Tennessee. It's a scoring conversation. It increases his scoring potential to be a part of an offense if they decide to utilize him in the red zone a bit more efficiently and more effectively than the way that he was utilized in Atlanta. So that's one of the biggest shifts that I'm going to be looking for, to see if that ends up being a part of his game that accelerates now in Tennessee, because in Atlanta, there wasn't really the other red zone threat. They were about to add one in Kyle Pitts, but they didn't really have the other red zone threat. A.J. Brown is a legitimate red zone threat. Does that help Julio Jones, because of the attention that has to go to A.J. Brown, become equalize on that matter and then become more of a scoring threat within the 20s?
Absolutely. Well, there's that too. And part of me too, I'm looking at now from the Falcons side of things. Mm-hmm. How much do we see Kyle Pitts as an inline guy? Are we going to see him more as a kind of like a split out as a receiver now? Because now you factor in that in. Who else do they have? Obviously Hayden Hurst, the tight end position. You don't necessarily need to utilize Pitts in that position to where he has to be inline. He can be flexed out to the outside because he's got the skill set as a wide receiver too. He's not just tight end. He could do it all. So does this impact them in a way where it's going to benefit them? I still can't, when I look at the lineup of a potential Julio, Pitts, and Ridley lineup, that's great, but they're not going to get that now. Now it's going to be Ridley and Pitts and Hurst and obviously Mike Davis at tailback. So implications all across the board, but I know that you're glad that Julio Jones is leaving the NFC South division, especially as somebody who covers the Saints every day.
Yeah, I can rest easy. The guy actually had, the interesting thing is, against New Orleans, he only had 3 career touchdowns against the Saints. And the Saints, of course, this is one of the things where you look at his underutilization in the red zone. The Saints were atrocious in the red zone early on in the season last year, and it definitely got better by the time that they ended up facing the Falcons. They didn't end up facing him until later on in the season, but even with the red zone struggles that were there presently throughout the 3, 7, and 9 seasons, 2014, 15, 16, he was just severely underutilized in that offense in positions where they could have been able to take advantage of a team like the New Orleans Saints, who was weak in that area, and they never did. And honestly, look, I think Calvin Ridley is, we talk about a number one. I think that Calvin Ridley is effective as the, let's say, top option in that offense with the style of offense that they play, whether Julio Jones is there or not. So I do think that they continue to have the firepower over on that offensive side to continue to produce. But are they going to, because we have to remember that it does take some time for tight ends to adjust to the NFL game. How quickly can Kyle Pitts be effective? And does it speed up his efficacy because they move him to the outside as opposed to utilizing him in line? That could potentially speed up his ability to be able to contribute to that offense. But now the Falcons have a little bit of shuffling that they'll do to make sure that they produce on the offensive side enough to make sure that they can keep up, just like Aaron Freeman mentioned, with potential deficiencies over on the defensive side. So the scoring potential that Tennessee gains, that is gained because of what's lost in Atlanta.
Especially when you lose 20-13 in the playoffs, you need to be able to score more than 13 points. That offense has the ability now, I think, it's hard to really even put an average on it. But if you look at maybe their overall productivity last year and you add Julio Jones to the mix, maybe they can average 27, 28, even 30 points per game, because it's going to be really hard to stop the rushing attack that is Derrick Henry as is. If that defense can play how it played last year in bits and spurts and stay healthy, they're going to have a really good unit. And as Tyler said, they're kind of in this win now mode. This is the best time right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see what the Atlanta Falcons do next. We expect somewhere around a second and a fifth for this trade, sending Julio Jones to the Tennessee Titans. We had a live reaction here with Locked On Titans host Tyler Rowland, and Cody and I here breaking it down for you a little bit more as well. So we'll continue to break it down here across the Locked On Podcast Network, Locked On Falcons, Locked On Titans, and of course Locked On NFL and the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. We'll have it covered from every angle you can imagine.